John had lived in the same small Mississippi town his whole life. Known for his wit, his gentle southern drawl, and a sense of calm that never broke even during storms. He wasn't the kind of man you'd expect to cause a scene. At 62, John was a retired Marine, a decorated veteran who'd served his country with quiet pride. These days, his battles were smaller, fixing up old cars, coaching Little League, and helping elderly neighbors with their groceries. That morning, John had driven to the corner gas station for his usual cup of black coffee and a scratch-off ticket. It was just after 7 a.m., and the sun was rising slow behind the pine trees. The streets were empty, the world still yawning awake. But for some reason, a police cruiser had been trailing him for 3 blocks. At first, John didn't think much of it. Maybe the officer was just patrolling. But when he turned into the gas station and the cruiser followed him in, parking hard behind his truck and blocking it in, his instincts kicked in. Slowly, he stepped out, coffee in one hand, keys in the other. Then came the command, "Hands where I can see him." Now, John froze. The officer, young, face tight with nerves, uniform stiff with fresh starch, was already out of his car. Gun drawn, finger trembling over the trigger. John's hands went up slowly. "Son," he said calmly, "there's no need for that. I just came for coffee." But the officer wasn't listening. "Step away from the truck," he barked. "Don't move. You matched the description of a suspect from an armed robbery 10 minutes ago." John didn't argue. He'd been trained not to escalate, even when the other side was dangerously wrong. The cashier inside, recognizing John, rushed out, "That's Mr. Kennedy. He comes here every morning." The officer shouted her down. "Stay back, ma'am." Tension hung in the humid morning air like a coiled spring. Then, just as backup arrived, sirens slicing through the quiet, a black SUV pulled up. Out stepped Sheriff Alan Matthews, the county's top lawman and a longtime friend of John's. He looked at the scene, wide-eyed. His gaze moved from the young officer's shaking hand on the trigger to John, still standing silently, arms raised. "Stand down," the sheriff ordered, his voice cutting like steel. The officer hesitated, blinking in disbelief. "I said, stand down." Sheriff Matthews roared, marching toward him. The officer reluctantly lowered his weapon, his face flushed, part rage, part shame. Sheriff Matthews turned to John with an apology in his eyes. "You all right, John?" John nodded slowly. "Could have gone worse." The sheriff then turned to the officer and, to everyone's shock, said, "You're under arrest." Gasps escaped from the gathering crowd. The officer looked stunned. "For what?" "I thought you acted on nothing but assumptions," Matthews said. "You profiled an innocent man and escalated a peaceful situation into a near tragedy. You pulled a weapon without evidence, ignored a witness, and nearly took the life of a man who served this country." He read the officer his rights, right? There in front of everyone. John stood still, processing it all. Later that day, John sat at home on his porch, a fresh cup of coffee in his hands. His wife, Lucy, by his side. He wasn't angry. He wasn't bitter. "I don't want that young man's life ruined," John said quietly. "But someone's got to teach him this badge doesn't make you God. It makes you responsible." Lucy reached for his hand. The incident made headlines across the country. Retired Marine has gun pulled on him, cop ends up in cuffs. Communities erupted with debates, protests, and hard conversations. But in the middle of all the noise, one voice stood steady, John's. He agreed to speak at town halls, at police departments, at schools. Not with fury, but with wisdom. He talked about restraint, about dignity, about what it feels like to have a gun pointed at you in your own neighborhood for simply existing. Asterisk, he met with a young officer, two who had since been dismissed from the force. Asterisk, I made the worst mistake of my life, the officer confessed. Breaking down in front of John, asterisk, John put a hand on his shoulder. Learn from it, change because of it. That's all any of us can do. The story of John Kennedy became more than a headline. Asterisk, it became a symbol of accountability, humility, and healing. It reminded people that justice doesn't always roar, it sometimes speaks in calm, steady tones. That real strength isn't about the power you hold, it's about the grace with which you wield it. Asterisk, in the end, John didn't become famous for the war he fought overseas. Asterisk, he became a hero for the peace he maintained at home.